Hello and welcome to Rauta Beyond. This time I'm gonna tell you about The Last of Us 2 game, which is already out, been quite a few weeks already, and I guess the most enthusiastic fans have already finished the game and either liked it or disliked it, as it seems to be the case in the internet. So many people have been disappointed by it, so many people have actually liked it, and the game has been selling like crazy. To be honest, I'm not really surprised, and I think it's just a good sign that the game is actually dividing opinions. Well, with this video, I'm just gonna obviously tell you about my own experience with the game, and I'm gonna give you 5 reasons or pointers why you should play this game as well. Whether you buy it, borrow it, steal it, or whatever, or maybe just watch the stream. But I guess you should definitely play it, especially if you're a gamer. Now, The Last of Us 2 basically continues straight from the story where the first game, The Last of Us, just, ended. Not right away after that, but still, this is very much a sequel, very much a continuation to the original story. And as such, I guess most people definitely should play the original game before going to The Last of Us 2. Now, obviously, as a game, if you don't mind the story so much, of course you can pretty much just enjoy the game as it is and not so much mind about the original game. But considering that both games are available on PS4, that is PlayStation 4, I think there's very, very few excuses why not to play the original game because, well, the story makes a lot more sense and feels more impactful if you just play the first game before hopping on the sequel. Anyway, here are my 5 pointers why you should play the game called The Last of Us 2. Now, the first reason is it's actual fun. Despite being a horror survival game, I think the game is actually very, very enjoyable. Here you will see me playing on this my stream. This is actually the very first part because I kind of want to avoid spoilers. So it will just roll on the initial parts and maybe I will just hop here meanwhile. But anyway, the main point is the game is really fun to play. Despite being full of horror, despite full of tragedies, despite full of nasty shit happening throughout the game, it's very, very enjoyable. And that is made of many parts. I mean, it includes the story, it includes the characters, it includes the dialogue, it includes the balance between different aspects of the game, be it gathering or more like scavenging the parts, be it about action, fighting humans, fighting the zombie-like creatures, or just whatever. So in my opinion is that this game is enjoyable throughout different factors in the game, and I don't know what else to say. It is really enjoyable game, like overall. In my opinion, basically every aspect of the sequel is better than the original game. And that brings me to the factor number 2, gameplay. Gameplay is definitely better than on the original game because, well, everything is more honed, more polished. That it is, whether we're talking about combat, melee combat, going with guns, going, gathering those parts, scavenging if you will, and just everything here is, in my opinion, a little bit better. Now it seems it's like a little bit loading because I just decided to put it on the background rather than having this video on its own, but I don't know if that really does matter. Anyway, the gameplay is very, very nicely done, so it is feeling really smooth, and it's like everything just comes from the backbone. I mean, whether it's about of these fights or exploring different parts of the game, riding horse, I mean, everything is really, really smooth and nicely done. So it's kind of a vital part of enjoying the game. And that brings us to the third point of why to play this game. Well, obviously this stream is not doing justice to these graphics. So this is kind of a poor example what I'm gonna say next, and that is the graphics. The graphics are very much of this current generation, which is gonna be exceeded by the next generation, which is out soon with new Xbox and PlayStation 5. But in my opinion, this is really beautiful game in so many aspects. Whether we're talking about the landscape, whether we're talking about the animation of these characters, their faces, or horrible creatures, everything is really nice. I don't know if the graphics actually show totally correctly because I was playing this as HDR, and sometimes what you see on the screen it might be a little bit different versus what is going on your television screen or your other kind of display, because well, you kind of need to have that HDR in order to be all those colors properly there. But anyway, I gotta say, really nicely looking game, which then again adds another layer here to the game, and it's really kind of eye candy if you ask me. That is also related to point number 4 here, which is the atmosphere. The general atmosphere here is, I mean, after all, this is a game of dystopia. The world is pretty much like in a bad shape, and there are enemies, not only human beings and not only those zombie creatures, but both of them coming from different angles and different gangs. I mean, it's a dark place. It's a horrible place, way more horrible than our current year, even though with all this kind of a coronavirus and whatever. So the overall atmosphere is really nice, and music plays an important factor in that. And also, of course, the dialogue with the characters and the overall environments and all that stuff, plus the combat, obviously, and the survival horror element. And everything is nicely here in balance. Sometimes you go a lot into action. Then when you need to have this kind of a breathing space, you will have it. Because it's not all about just fighting or surviving. You have these places and moments where you just have this dialogue with your, I don't know, colleagues or friends. And you also spend quite a lot of scavenging parts, picking off different elements, Bitcoin parts or just parts for your first aid kit or whatever. And all these different parts, dead animals, carcasses, or fighting these human enemies or zombie-like plant creatures, they all play their part in building this atmosphere. And I think it's really great and enjoyable. Sometimes out of your comfort zone, but I think that's just the best thing in that. It's not always fun. And I think a horror survival game couldn't really be all the time like being in a comfort zone. So if you're expecting that, well, you're playing the wrong game, my friend. Last but not least, the story. Maybe it's also the least part because, in my opinion, it doesn't really go to the level of the first game. But that is not to say that I really didn't enjoy it. Because the thing here is the first game had a really great story. It felt like so emotional and it felt, worthwhile. It had this big impact. Now the second game is a little bit different. First of all, it's not like you're playing only one character, and that already divided people into different categories. Some people hated it and were complaining all over the internet because the game puts you into this uncomfort zone. And I think it's really important in this kind of game. Like I said, in the atmosphere part. And I don't really find all that complaining like it's justified. I am going to say this much though. I don't want to spoil anything about the storyline, but I'm going to say this much. The very last few minutes of the game were a little bit of a disappointment. So how the story actually ends was a disappointment for me. But overall, the journey was really interesting and really enjoyable, and I really liked it all over the game. The whole game took me for I think it was something like 32, 34 hours roughly. And so if the last 15 minutes or so were a little bit of a disappointing, it doesn't really matter because it's I enjoyed 99 or 98% of the game very much. Be it about fighting these horrible creatures, or be it about survival of the game, or scavenging different parts, or whatever. Like I said, really enjoyable atmosphere, great music, great graphics, interesting storyline and all that stuff. Not maybe 10 out of 10 game for me. I'm more inclined to say something like 9 out of 10. Maybe on the plus side of 9 out of 10, but still. But anyway, still one of the best games I've played on PS4. Really, really nice game, and I think everybody should give it a chance. I guess that's pretty much all there is to be said on my behalf of the game. Should you have any comments or questions, put them on the comments box below and I will get back to you. But meanwhile, consider playing this game, especially if you have already PlayStation 4. They're hanging out waiting for some cool game to be played. That's all. Take care. Bye bye.